Welcome to History Explained, where we illuminate the past to better understand our present. I'm your guide to your daily journey through the past to empower the future. Today is Saturday, June 7, 2025. As we do every Saturday, we're exploring a pivotal military engagement that altered the course of history and demonstrated the power of Allied cooperation in the face of totalitarian aggression. Today, we turn our attention to D-Day, the Allied invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, exactly 81 years ago yesterday. Operation Overlord, as it was officially known, was the largest seaborne invasion in history and marked the opening of the long-awaited Second Front in Western Europe that would ultimately lead to Nazi Germany's defeat. What makes D-Day particularly remarkable is how it represented the culmination of years of planning, technological innovation, and international cooperation on an unprecedented scale. The success of the Normandy landings required perfect coordination between multiple nations, services, and millions of personnel, all while maintaining absolute secrecy and overcoming formidable German defenses. So let's explore this decisive moment in World War II, examining the strategic circumstances that made the invasion necessary, the meticulous planning that made it possible, the dramatic events of June 6, 1944, and the profound consequences that followed for the war and the world. By 1943, the strategic situation in World War II had reached a critical juncture. The Soviet Union had been bearing the brunt of the war against Nazi Germany since 1941, suffering enormous casualties while slowly pushing German forces back from the gates of Moscow and Stalingrad. Stalin repeatedly demanded that his Western allies open a second front in Europe to relieve pressure on the Red Army. The United States and Britain had been fighting German and Italian forces in North Africa and Italy since 1942, but these campaigns, while successful, did not constitute the major Western European offensive that could truly divide German attention and resources. The limited scope of Mediterranean operations meant that the vast majority of German ground forces remained concentrated on the Eastern Front. American military leaders, particularly General George Marshall, had favored an early cross-channel invasion since 1942, believing that only a direct assault on Nazi-occupied France could achieve decisive results. However, British leaders, mindful of their traumatic experiences at Gallipoli in World War I and Dieppe in 1942, insisted that such an invasion required overwhelming preparation and resources to succeed. The failed Dieppe raid of August 1942, in particular, had demonstrated the enormous challenges facing any attempted invasion of occupied Europe. The raid, primarily involving Canadian forces, resulted in heavy casualties and showed that German coastal defenses were formidable and that seizing a fortified port would be extremely difficult if not impossible. These lessons led to fundamental changes in Allied invasion planning. Rather than attempting to capture an existing port, the Allies would need to bring their own harbor facilities. Rather than relying solely on surprise, they would need overwhelming air and naval superiority. And rather than hoping for German weakness, they would need to prepare for determined resistance. The decision to launch Operation Overlord was formally confirmed at the Tehran Conference in November 1943, where Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin agreed that the cross-channel invasion would take place in May 1944. This commitment represented a crucial strategic decision that would shape the final phases of the war in Europe. Planning for D-Day began in earnest in early 1943 under the direction of a combined Anglo-American staff. The operation faced unprecedented logistical challenges, transporting and supplying over 150,000 troops across the English Channel, establishing a secure beachhead against determined opposition, and rapidly building up forces faster than the Germans could reinforce their defenses. The selection of Normandy as the invasion site was itself a masterpiece of strategic analysis. The Pas-de-Calais region was the most obvious choice. It was closest to England, had good port facilities, and offered the shortest route to Germany. However, these very advantages meant that German defenses there were strongest, and the terrain offered limited opportunities for rapid expansion inland. Normandy presented different advantages. Its beaches were suitable for landing craft, the German defenses were lighter than at Pas-de-Calais, and the Cotentin Peninsula could provide opportunities for capturing the port of Cherbourg. Most importantly, the Germans considered Normandy a less likely invasion site, meaning the Allies might achieve tactical surprise even if strategic surprise was impossible. The man chosen to command Operation Overlord was General Dwight D. Eisenhower, whose experience commanding Allied forces in North Africa and Italy had demonstrated his ability to manage complex international military operations. Eisenhower's selection reflected the reality that American resources would dominate the invasion, but his diplomatic skills and even temperament made him acceptable to British commanders and political leaders. Under Eisenhower's overall command, the invasion was organized into distinct national sectors. American forces under General Omar Bradley would land at Utah and Omaha beaches, while British and Canadian forces under General Bernard Montgomery would assault Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches. This arrangement reflected both national sensitivities and practical considerations about logistics and reinforcement. The scale of preparation for D-Day was extraordinary. Southern England became one vast military camp as American and British forces trained intensively for amphibious operations. Entire coastal areas were cleared of civilians to allow for realistic rehearsals, some of which resulted in significant casualties even before the actual invasion. Perhaps most remarkably, the Allies constructed 2 artificial harbors, codenamed Mulberries, that could be towed across the Channel and assembled off the Normandy coast. These harbors, along with an underwater fuel pipeline called Pluto Pipeline under the ocean, would enable the massive logistical support required to sustain the invasion forces. The deception operations supporting D-Day were equally impressive. Operation Fortitude created an entire fictional army group under General George Patton, complete with dummy tanks, fake radio traffic, and double agents feeding false information to German intelligence. This deception convinced German commanders that the main invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais, with Normandy serving merely as a diversion. German preparations for the expected invasion were hampered by fundamental disagreements about defensive strategy. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, responsible for coastal defenses, believed that the invasion had to be defeated on the beaches, since Allied air power would prevent effective movement of reserves once the landing began. He therefore concentrated on strengthening beach obstacles and fortifications. In contrast, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, overall commander of German forces in the West, preferred a defense in depth that would allow the invasion to come ashore before counter-attacking with mobile reserves. This strategic disagreement meant that German preparations fell between 2 approaches, maximizing neither immediate beach defense nor rapid counterattack capability. Adolf Hitler's personal involvement in defensive planning further complicated German preparations. The Führer insisted on fortifying every possible landing site rather than concentrating forces, and his order that coastal divisions not be moved without his personal permission fatally delayed German responses on D-Day itself. The invasion was originally scheduled for June 5, but poor weather forced a 24-hour postponement. This delay created enormous tension, as thousands of troops were already aboard landing craft and the complex timetables for air and naval operations had to be recalculated. Eisenhower's decision to proceed on June 6, despite continuing marginal weather, proved crucial to the operation's success. D-Day began before dawn with massive Allied air and naval bombardments designed to suppress German coastal defenses. Over 13,000 Allied aircraft participated in operations on June 6, achieving complete air superiority and preventing German reinforcements from moving effectively during daylight hours. Allied naval forces included over 5,000 ships of all types, from battleships to landing craft. The airborne operations that preceded the beach landings were crucial to the invasion's success. American paratroopers of the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions jumped inland from Utah Beach to secure key objectives and prevent German reinforcements from reaching the coast. British paratroopers captured vital bridges and strong points to protect the eastern flank of the invasion. These airborne operations were marked by considerable confusion as troops were scattered widely by poor weather and navigation errors. However, this dispersion actually aided the invasion by confusing German commanders about Allied intentions and creating the impression of a much larger airborne assault than had actually occurred. The beach landings themselves varied dramatically in their difficulty and casualties. Utah Beach, the westernmost American landing site, proceeded relatively smoothly due to light opposition and effective preliminary bombardment. The 4th Infantry Division established a secure foothold with relatively few casualties. Omaha Beach presented the greatest challenge and became synonymous with the courage and sacrifice of D-Day. Strong German positions on the bluffs overlooking the beach, combined with rough seas that disrupted landing schedules, created a deadly killing field. For several hours, the landing at Omaha hung in the balance as American troops suffered heavy casualties while struggling to advance inland. The success at Omaha ultimately depended on the initiative of small unit leaders and individual soldiers who found ways to breach German defenses despite the chaos and casualties. Naval gunfire support and the gradual accumulation of troops and equipment on the beach eventually enabled American forces to break through German positions and secure their objectives. The British and Canadian beaches, Gold, Juno, and Sword, generally experienced less resistance than Omaha, though each presented unique challenges. Canadian forces at Juno Beach faced particularly strong opposition but succeeded in advancing farther inland than any other Allied forces on D-Day. British forces at Gold and Sword beaches achieved their immediate objectives while linking up with airborne forces. By the end of June 6, approximately 156,000 Allied troops had landed in Normandy, establishing a continuous beachhead about 24 miles wide and varying in depth from 3 to 7 miles. While this fell short of some optimistic planning assumptions, it represented a solid foundation for the subsequent campaign. German responses to the invasion were fatally delayed and confused. Many senior commanders were absent from their posts. Rommel was in Germany celebrating his wife's birthday, while others were participating in war games. Hitler, who often stayed up late and slept until midday, was not informed of the invasion until late in the morning, further delaying critical decisions about releasing reserve forces. The German High Command's initial assessment was that Normandy represented a diversionary attack, with the main invasion still to come at Pas-de-Calais. This misunderstanding, reinforced by continuing Allied deception operations, prevented the Germans from committing their strongest reserves to defeating the Normandy landings while they were still vulnerable. The immediate aftermath of D-Day saw intense fighting as both sides raced to build up their forces in Normandy. The Allies benefited from complete air and naval superiority, enabling them to reinforce and supply their beachhead more effectively than the Germans could bring up reserves. However, the hedgerow country of Normandy proved ideally suited to defensive warfare, and German resistance was fierce and effective. The breakout from Normandy took longer than Allied planners had hoped, with the campaign developing into a grinding battle of attrition reminiscent of World War I. However, the Allies' material advantages and air superiority gradually wore down German resistance, setting the stage for the spectacular breakthrough that would come in late July with Operation Cobra. The strategic consequences of D-Day's success were profound and immediate. The establishment of a secure Western front forced Germany to fight a true two-front war, dividing resources and attention between East and West. German reserves that might have stemmed Soviet advances in Eastern Europe were instead committed to defending France. D-Day also demonstrated the decisive importance of Allied cooperation and combined arms operations in modern warfare. The successful coordination of air, sea, and land forces from multiple nations showed how technological superiority and careful planning could overcome even strong defensive positions. The invasion marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. While nearly a year of hard fighting lay ahead, D-Day made Germany's ultimate defeat inevitable by opening a front that German resources could not sustain while simultaneously fighting the Soviet Union. For the Western Allies, D-Day represented vindication of their strategic approach and demonstrated American industrial and military power on a global stage. The success of the invasion established the United States as the dominant Western power and set the stage for post-war American global leadership. D-Day also had profound implications for post-war Europe. The successful Western invasion ensured that American and British forces would participate in Germany's defeat and occupation, preventing Soviet domination of all of Central and Western Europe. The geopolitical arrangements that emerged from D-Day's success would shape the Cold War and European development for decades. The human cost of D-Day was significant but far less than many had feared. Allied casualties on June 6 totaled approximately 10,000, with about 4,400 killed. While tragic, these losses were considerably lower than the 20,000 casualties that some planners had anticipated for the first day alone. The success of D-Day reflected years of preparation, technological innovation, and international cooperation on an unprecedented scale. From the artificial harbors to the deception operations, from airborne assaults to naval gunfire support, every aspect of the operation demonstrated how careful planning and superior resources could overcome formidable obstacles. Perhaps most importantly, D-Day represented the triumph of democratic cooperation over totalitarian aggression. The invasion succeeded because free nations could work together effectively while maintaining the initiative and flexibility that totalitarian systems often lacked. As we commemorate D-Day 81 years later, we remember not only the courage of the soldiers who stormed the beaches of Normandy but also the vision of leaders who understood that defeating tyranny required unprecedented cooperation and sacrifice. The success of Operation Overlord reminds us that when free peoples unite behind common purposes, they can achieve what seems impossible. The legacy of D-Day extends far beyond its immediate military success. It established precedents for international cooperation, demonstrated the importance of technological innovation in warfare, and showed how democratic societies could mobilize their full resources for righteous causes. Today, as we face new challenges to freedom and democracy around the world, the example of D-Day reminds us that defending liberty sometimes requires extraordinary measures and that success depends on unity, preparation, and unwavering commitment to shared values. Thank you for joining us for this exploration of D-Day and its lasting significance. Tomorrow, we'll be back with our Innovations and Inventions episode where we'll be examining the development of the transistor and its revolutionary impact on modern technology and communication. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. What aspects of the D-Day operation do you find most remarkable, and how do you think its lessons apply to contemporary challenges facing democratic societies? Let us know in the comments section below. For our members, this Sunday we'll have a special roundup of military developments from the past week with connections to the historical patterns of warfare and international cooperation we've been exploring in this series. Until next time, I'm your guide for History Explained, where we believe that understanding yesterday is the key to navigating tomorrow.